Hello, and welcome to Flipping the Table's second episode in our 6-part podcast series, featuring voices from the 2026 Old Salt Festival in Montana. This show features separate back-to-back conversations with festival attendees who are providing capital, technical expertise, and market development support for ranchers, farmers, and related businesses on the cutting edge of the regenerative agriculture sector. And look out for our third episode next week, when you will hear from 2 amazing ranching women who collaborate on a successful grass-fed meat brand. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to my conversation with 3 good people who are providing capital and other business support to farmers, ranchers, and related companies essential to meeting the growing demand for food you can trust, that comes from sources that deeply care about health and quality. These days, we often describe these products as regenerative or regenerative organic. In the past, the buzzwords included sustainable, or we'd simply say organic. Farmers and ranchers are often frustrated with this parade of changing phrases, but they do serve a purpose. They are an indicator of the evolution in consumer desires. My guests today see this evolution as a positive sign that more people are awakening to the power of purchases to improve our food. But change is not easy on a farm or ranch where margins are thin, weather is unpredictable, and regulations are a complex burden. Agriculture is risky, and taking on debt or sharing equity adds to that risk. But it is almost always essential to making a significant change, like reducing or eliminating toxic chemicals, or foregoing genetically modified seeds, or vertically integrating as the Old Salt Co-op has done. So this episode includes 2 conversations with financial leaders who are trusted sources of capital. My first is with Alissa Welker and Ryan Anderson from Steward, which is a community lending platform focused on ecological and economic regeneration. Steward has provided loans to over 100 small regional operations across the nation. They have perspective on what makes for success and what we need to maintain the current growth momentum. Then, my colleague Coco Sanabria joins me in a conversation with Stephen Hohenrieder, founder of Grounded Capital. He is a pioneer investor in farm and ranch companies and brands that are well known today. As with Ryan and Alissa, Stephen has a clear analysis of why regional and regeneratively produced food is taking off and what more is needed to maintain growth in the sector. In my opinion, on the business side of the food movement, Stephen is the deepest system thinker about how to make our agriculture and food better. He has decades of experience with successfully investing in not only individual businesses, but in ecosystems of related businesses that prosper. Both Stephen at Grounded Capital and Ryan and Alissa at Steward are moving America to an agriculture that is better for the soil, rural communities, and the people who eat the food from the enterprises they help create. So let's begin. Ryan and Alissa, really glad to have you here at our table to talk.
Yes, thank you.
About why you came to Old Salt. I want to hear all about it. So you want to start, Ryan?
Sure.
Okay.
I guess there's 2 answers to that question. We, Steward, our company provides debt financing for sustainable and regenerative food system projects, and Old Salt is one of the companies that we have a long-standing relationship with. So that's sort of the boring answer. But really, Cole Mannix is such an amazing leader and has such a unique ability to really lead with his heart and bring together people for astonishingly honest and genuine conversations. Mm-hmm. And so different people on the Steward team have been coming to the festival since the first year, and every time we're just blown away at the kinds of conversations that we get to have here and really deal honestly with what's going on in U.S. agriculture. So you have to come back.
That's a great reason.
Yeah.
That's good.
And I would say, we spend our days largely behind computers, talking to folks like Cole in different ecosystems and watersheds across the U.S. and having the chance to be here. We spend also a lot of time kind of going and visiting projects, but to see the Old Salt Festival and see the community and the layers of the ecosystem that it has really taken to build up Old Salt, it's like putting fire behind our work and reinvigorating, like, okay, this is why I sit behind a computer and do the work that I do, because this is what's happening on the ground and what we're funding.
It's the reality. You're seeing you're experiencing it. That's great. So why don't you each talk a little bit about what your specific role is at Steward and a little bit of history of the company?
Sure.
Because I think that's important, because you guys, from what my perspective is, you're kind of on the cutting edge of like what's really cool in the regenerative space. So,
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm the Chief Operating Officer here at Steward. The company was founded in 2016, and we are, like I said, a private commercial lender. We really started, our focus was on providing financing to the farmers themselves for land acquisition, infrastructure, equipment, those kinds of on-farm needs. And one of the things that we've really seen over the last couple of years that's so essential is that you can't just support the growth of the farm through that on-farm financing. Ultimately, we need to be driving sales to consumers. And so we're now deploying capital throughout the supply chain, all the way from, organic certified input manufacturers to a lot of processing and that sort of middle infrastructure, all the way to CPG brands, because often what that farmer needs is not just debt financing on the farm. They need access to markets, and they need a fair price for the product and the quality that they're putting into that market.
So operating capital versus...
We don't do operating lines for those farms, but I'm talking about a good example is Old Salt. This is a business that's owned by 6 different ranching families, and they got tired of doing grass-finished beef in the state and then shipping them out of state for processing and selling them at the auction and not getting any of that value recognition. Mm-hmm. Both financially and emotionally, they're putting a lot of their values into that product. And so by building this vertically integrated system where they have processing and cut and wrap and retail and 2 different restaurant outlets, they're able to own that entire system. They've got all those hands is feeding back to the profitability of those ranches, and they're able to sort of get that better pricing. So it's really about how do we build these systems to return capital to the producers. And then those ranches don't need as much debt financing because they're really healthy and they have profitability. And we've lost sight of how hard a lot of farms and ranches are struggling right now.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah, I am Steward's Senior Vice President of Operations. I manage our borrower pipeline and basically help make sure that the projects that are coming in across the U.S., anything from infrastructure development to equipment projects coming in, making sure they move through our pipeline, and really talking to the producers, the business owners, and helping them through our diligence process, and kind of combining my backgrounds in agriculture and working with our financial team to help meld those 2 worlds and the vocabulary of those 2 worlds together.
Yeah, because they're different.
Yeah.
So how many projects are you guys part of across the country right now?
Since 2020, we have provided financing to over 100 projects.
100 projects.
We've probably got 60 to 65 that are still actively in our portfolio.
And how many states are you operating in?
We've been in 36 states.
36 states. And is there a concentration or a focus for those states?
There is. We have a lot going on in the Pacific Northwest. Washington and Oregon
That's
are
where
really
you're
big
based?
for
That's
us.
not where your founders was based?
We're based in Oregon. There is a lot of small-scale agriculture that still happens in the Pacific Northwest, and regenerative agriculture that's sort of growing in that space, so that's a really big market for us. Also a little bit sort of in the Appalachian Mountains and along the East Coast is another big region for us.
Those are places where there are a lot of small farms moving in this direction.
Yeah.
So there are natural places, I guess, for you to end up working.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we're really focusing on how do we look at things from a watershed scale. And that's part of, yes, we still provide loans to farmers, ranchers, but as we go further up the supply chain, the larger impact in the infrastructure for farmers and ranchers across that watershed, whether it be processing meat or grain or distribution, there's value in kind of supporting those larger infrastructure projects to support a lot of
different farmers,
those producers in the area.
Yeah. So okay. So are you doing all the different commodities, all the crops, all the livestock, or are you focused on certain specific things?
We'll work with all agricultural products.
Okay. So wow, that's great. And what's exciting you right now? What are you thinking about? Like, because your business has been going for how long? You said
Since 2016.
yeah,
10
16.
years.
So 10 years.
Yeah.
So that's a track record. You've got a track record now. As you think about the evolution of the business, what are you thinking about?
I'm excited for the growth of regenerative as a movement and as something that consumers are demanding. And there are so many opportunities to support new businesses and expanding businesses in this space. One of the sort of things I was looking at recently was just how the CPG, so consumer packaged goods market, is moving right now. And even though there has been a growth across the entire consumer packaged goods space over the last couple of years, all of that growth is the result of smaller upstart brands and not those big multinational corporations. And they have been pretty flat, right? And so I think what you're seeing is that consumers are more and more demanding that they know what's in their food and that food actually has a health profile and a nutritional profile that's actually good for them. And if we can keep up that demand, then that is going to be what drives the system to sort of change practices at scale.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like you're bullish.
Yeah.
You're bullish on the regenerative frame for
Very
food.
much so.
Okay.
Yep. And I think piggybacking off that, some of what consumers and then food companies are looking for is being able to trace back to the farm or to certain practices. And especially in the processing world, to use grain processing as an example, almost all of the large mills in the U.S. just use a mass balance approach. There is no way to trace a load of, let's call it oats, coming in from a farm all the way through to the finished product. And so the large mills really can't provide what some of these CPG companies are looking for. And so what's really cool about some of the projects that we're funding and working on right now is they're building mill infrastructure that is kind of in between the really small and the really big. It is regional scale infrastructure, and they're building it with the technology to enable that traceability back to the farm. And that is a differentiating factor that the large mills, without like a complete rebuild or real investment into a completely different way of doing things within their mills, they can't do that. And so the ability to have this like really different type of infrastructure within the regional ecosystem, I think will help set these projects apart.
Uh-huh. So let's talk about this because, I'm almost 30 years in this world, and I've seen a lot of, like when organic was going, it started that way very much. People were really differentiated. And then the big companies, what they did is they didn't actually try and create it, they bought it.
Yeah.
And so do you see that happening with regenerative?
I think that tension will be there, right? But we as the people on the front line and the people doing the work need to constantly stay ahead of those kinds of shifts, right? Like capital is always going to be looking to buy whatever the new thing is and co-opt whatever improvements there are. Mm-hmm. And that's just going to be a factor that we have to deal with year in and year out and constantly push the envelope. I mean, organic used to be the be-all, end-all, and now organic regenerative is this new growing. So we're seeing improvement and advancement even despite that sort of co-option.
That's a good point. I like that. One thing I've been thinking about is that there are certain things like meat. It's easier for JBS to buy a meat company that's doing regenerative, like, Thousand Hills or something that's already got some scale.
Sure.
Versus a small veg crop grower or someone that's doing a grain. Well, grain even might be more like meat, but some of these products are a little bit harder to get to a scale where they're going to be interested, right? Mm-hmm. But then the question becomes, are they interesting enough for capital? Like, if you looked at your portfolio, how much of it is like vegetables or fruit that is feeding a watershed versus meat or grain?
I don't know from a percentage basis. We definitely, I would say over the past several years, have definitely looked at more grain processing, meat processing, but still fund a lot of kind of small producers growing, diversified veg that's less on a watershed scale, more on a community scale. But, so I'm from Ann Arbor, Michigan. It's a farm stop. There's a store called Argus in Ann Arbor that Washtenaw County, the county that I live in, is either one of the only or the only county in the state of Michigan that has actually had an increase in the number of farmers because
the local market took off.
Because of the local market took off, because people are interested in buying food from, it's also very close to agricultural communities, which makes a big difference. But the distribution centers, Argus is a community hub and a distribution center for, it's like a year-round, everyday farmers market where we can go and just grab the meat we want to cook for dinner or, the veg that's in season. And so that distribution and that access to distribution networks for all those small farmers that are diversified veg, I think that's the gathering place and the infrastructure in individual communities that are really key. And Steward hasn't funded Argus, but that just what we need to see to help those individual producers continue to succeed is having access to those marketplaces.
So like food hub kind of operations, that becomes very useful for lots of fruit and vegetable growers. And is that something, are people that are starting food hubs coming to you and asking for loans?
Yeah, we get approached by businesses throughout the value chain. So, people doing aggregation, food hubs, absolutely. People doing processing, it's everything.
Mm-hmm. I would think, I'm sorry I'm on this, but we're mapping for the state of California all the infrastructure for mid and small scale producers in the state, all 58 counties. It's a huge job. One of the things I'm constantly thinking about, because one of the best data sets the state has is aggregation hubs and food hubs, and because they're funding it. But I'm just curious, I look at them and I talk to the people that are running them, and the margins are so low.
Yeah.
You just wonder, as you think about the future, are these food hubs that we're seeing going to survive? I wonder.
It depends on the food hub, right? In some regions, it's going to continue to be a growing sort of space where there's going to be more consumer demand for that. I think it also is just a question of where does that consumer awareness shift to, right? Like having that regionalized aggregation and distribution capacity needs a consumer base locally that understands the value of seasonality. And if we're not talking about why a banana in December in Detroit isn't really the best for the food system, then we're not going to build that capacity. But in some areas, right, they're having these conversations, and Argus is amazing, and everybody should shop there.
Yeah, there are good examples of that type of, like the Berkeley Bowl. There's other places in the country that do that. Or actually in Detroit, there's the Detroit Market. I forget the name of it.
Eastern Market.
Eastern Market. That's another really good example. There's some amazing ones. So it'll be, like any interesting, there's a lot of people moving in. We'll see who can make it over the long term. I hope they all do. But it's a tough road to hoe. But this gets us into maybe, because what you just said, Ryan, about creating the consciousness or the consumer taste orientation, and you're seeing it building. You talked about that earlier. Do you see, in this morning talks, there was a lot of focus on the fact that the re-regionalization of the food system in the United States has been going on now for 20, 25 years, really. And it's all been they've been working in silos. But now we're getting to a stage where there might be some synergies to be gained by trying to connect these things and talk about them in a different way. So I'm just curious about because you're both you have a good perspective on the nation because of your work. So what do you see?
I think it's definitely starting to happen. I'll use two different examples. One with, it was originally funded nationally, but there was a period of time after COVID where there was a large focus on rebuilding regional meat processing. And that wasn't only through grants, but it was also through technical assistance providers. And so there was free technical assistance, USDA-funded technical assistance across the country to different processors or folks that wanted to start processing across the country. And so there's these hubs of knowledge in these technical assistance providers. Flower Hill Institute,
Flower Hill's great,
amazing. and a couple of others, and having those hubs of resources and knowledge, and then going out into the nodes of like all the different regions that I haven't seen, in grain processing or I haven't seen that sort of organization around something other than meat processing, which has been really neat. And then I would say in our
That was
work,
the Biden administration.
Yes.
Yes. I did a great job with that. Yeah.
And then I would say
Jenny Lester Moffat. Yeah.
Yes. And then I would say in our work, one of the things that has been really neat is because we work across the U.S. and because, at this point we've done a number of these infrastructure development projects. Steward, we're a small team. There's 9 of us, and we know what we don't know. So we will plug in folks from across the ecosystem into these projects, whether that be a development partner, a grant writing partner, whatever it might be.
Build teams.
And helping to basically, a lot of these, they're business owners and producers that are looking to build these businesses. Cole had never built a processing plant or a business or any sort of infrastructure development project. And so being able to take learnings from these projects as we've done them over the years, and we really now have kind of like this A team of, hey, here's the people you need to talk to that can support you in XYZ way. And then those people are also other people that have this knowledge of these projects across the country, and the learning and even the connection amongst them has been really awesome to see.
Yeah.
It's really encouraging.
Yeah. And I think, as much as we are building these regional food system economies, by and large, where the food is grown in this country and where the people live are separate. And so the consumer base, the person who's going to purchase those products, always needs to be somewhere else, right? Like one of the panelists yesterday was talking about if every person in the state of Montana purchased a quarter of beef a year, that would only be 250,000 head a year, and they're raising 4 or 5 million a year. And so for the local food system here to really thrive, it needs to be selling outside of the state of Montana, right? And New York City is not going to have enough cattle in the city for that. So there is a lot of opportunity, I think, both for this knowledge sharing that needs to happen, but also collaborating on sales and marketing and sort of getting that consumer awareness, on the coast to buy this product and understand the value of what's being done in Montana.
Yeah, that's a good point. We have a similar problem in California with a lot of crops.
Yes.
Like almonds.
Yes.
And often strawberries. We run into it all the time talking to different people like, we love the local market, but it's not going to keep us in business. So that is a challenge. And so those relationships, this is another theme today, relationships. Old Salt needs relationships here and there.
Yeah.
We all do, I think. So it kind of made me think about this idea of warriors, weavers, and builders. You guys are builders. So when you're trying to change a paradigm, you need warriors, weavers, and builders. So you guys are builders. You're putting this system together by providing a critical piece, which is the financing, so people can get the fuel to move. Then you've got the other folks who are weavers, who are kind of putting the different networks or the different people that need to be involved in the system. This is a weaving event. They brought all these people here. We're getting to meet each other. Yeah. But then you need the warriors. And those are the people that are taking these models and these networks and saying to the people who create the rules, we need new rules.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about what you think about new rules for the system.
I'm in favor of new rules.
Do you see new rules? Are you thinking about new rules? Do you wish there were new rules? In a way you kind of described around meat. That was a new rule in a sense. It was a program in the Farm Bill that allowed them to build, but it didn't really change any regs but it did offer a new pathway for development of a system.
It did.
Yes. I think that, there is so much about ag policy that could change. And like right now, the headwinds against producers that are doing things ecologically minded, like the headwinds are so against them in so many ways. Crop insurance is like my first answer that pops into mind.
It's insane.
The crop insurance program that exists in the U.S. is just needs so much change of, the fact that it can sometimes directly incentivize practices that just make no sense. Yeah, crop insurance, as a 2-word answer, crop insurance.
Good.
I think the warriors are actually the people who are building the systems out in the world. And I don't mean us, I mean like the producers and the entrepreneurs who are starting the businesses to do this. Because I think politics, like any other system of power, is very slow to change. And it's only responsive to pressure. And I don't think, with some exceptions, good things will happen coming out of Washington. But by and large, change in food systems is not going to happen quickly enough at the leadership of Washington. Politics doesn't lead, politics follows. Yep. And it's the people who are starting businesses and building a new vision for what's possible who are ultimately going to be the ones who have the leverage to make that change come to Washington. So people like Cole is a warrior, right? Like, he's doing something that's really out on the bleeding edge, and he is putting him and his family and these ranches are 100% in, money on the line to do something new. This, oat mill that Alissa was referring to earlier in the conversation in Minnesota. This is a mill that is owned by 130 different farming families. They put their real equity into this project to get it built. A lot of them, the success of their farm is hinging on the ability to add oats to the rotation and get a competitive price that's actually profitable for those oats. And those, I think, are the people who are really the warriors that are going to show there's a different way to do it, and politics at best will follow.
I agree. I think also politics in Washington follow what happens in states and counties first.
Yeah.
I mean, really, if you look at what happened, because I was just thinking about this the other day, if you think about what happened with the school food movement, it really started in like 3 little places at a school level, which grew to a county, then to a state, and then to 50 states, and now all the states in the union have farm-to-school programs. Yeah. And the government, actually $1.8 billion was spent on school food last year. Local food school. I'm talking about local food, not commodity food. Yeah. Yep. So that's how it happened, and it took 10 years, actually almost 20 years, to get a federal law to fund that. 20 years. Yeah. So it's local. I think it does start with people doing things. Unless there's a big tragedy like the Dust Bowl and the Great Depression where you can get a federal law, or as we did IRA during COVID.
Yes.
There was a moment, and that's how Biden got all that money for meat processing and other processing. So it's a combination, but generally it's local. So as you think about your next 2 days, are you guys going to be here next 2 days, or are you leaving? You have to leave.
I leave tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
Oh, too bad. I was going to say, what are you going to do the next 2 days here? What are you looking forward to meeting or seeing or talking to? Whom?
I won't. Sadly, I'm leaving as well.
Yeah.
And I think for me, and I'll be here tonight and tomorrow morning, of just the slow conversations, like the intentional present conversations that happen at the fringes of after the days, the activities are done, or like this morning of like the slow conversations had with other folks working in this industry, and just being present and getting to slow down and just be here. I know some people actually do have cell service here this year. My phone still doesn't work, which I'm frankly very happy about. Right. But just like really being present in those conversations is what I'm looking forward to.
It is. The evening's nice, actually. A little fire over there. And so good. Well, we're out of time. I want to say thank you very much for both your work. I mean, the work that you're doing, it's really amazing. And really appreciate you taking some time out to talk to us today.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
We hope you enjoyed Michael's conversation with Ryan and Alissa from Steward. Now let's hear from Stephen at Grounded Capital in conversation with Rox, Coco Sanabria, and Michael.
Stephen Hohenrieder and Coco Sanabria. We're here on the second day of Old Salt Festival in Helmville, Montana. Great to see you here. Great to have Coco back co-hosting in the second year of our adventures here. So, Stephen, what brought you to Old Salt with your daughter Gigi sitting over here?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. I've wanted to attend the last 4 years and haven't been able to join the group. But I've known Cole Mannix probably met him maybe 10 years ago, and have a lot of interest in the work he's doing and feel a lot of alignment through the work that I've been doing. And it really sounded like a chance to spend time with the community that I've built over the last 20 years. And it really has been wonderful to see people that I haven't seen in a couple of years. And it feels like a bit of a homecoming for everybody. And I've heard from others that they feel the same way.
Yeah, it's that way. And I'm looking behind you right now because your back is to the festival grounds. And over last year, there were probably 2/3, maybe 3/4 of the amount of people. Mm-hmm. This thing is growing.
It is. Lots of families, too.
Yeah, lots of kids. So, Stephen, before we go any further, I think it would be really good for you to talk about like your origin story that got you into this kind of work, because you were one of the first people I remember who was doing kind of, I would say, robust financial work with companies that were trying to become what we called organic, sustainable, and you were calling regenerative probably, but way back. So do you want to talk about how you got to this? And then we'll talk about specifically what you have done and are doing now.
Sure. So I grew up loving the land, and in college transferred to Cal Poly to study agribusiness, but went to work on Wall Street and spent the first third of my career doing that work, but observed
in
that
New York or here?
In San Francisco.
In San Francisco, okay.
Mm-hmm.
But observed that we and others were often investing in solutions to the symptoms of problems rather than the problems themselves. And that when we do that, our motivation is to grow the problem. And so I became very curious about the opportunity to invest private capital to build the health of systems rather than monetize the symptoms of unhealthy systems. I also had a hypothesis for how I believed our food system was evolving. And I believe that in many ways our food system is refragmenting, and that consumers are increasingly reconnecting with the source of their food, and that the opportunity to change how we produce our food can actually be driven by the demand of the consumer and just meeting that demand.
So I want to go back to something you said. You said the system is fragmenting. Refragmenting. So some people are calling that re-regionalizing. So you mean the same thing. The industrial system is kind of breaking up. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I think that if you look at how we produced our food for a very long time, it was hyper-regional production, and then we consumed it hyper-regionally. Mm-hmm. And that shifted to more centralized production and manufacturing, and that plugged into a global distribution system. Mm-hmm. I believe that as, and so if you look back to that time, leading into the industrialization of our food system, consumers were so enamored with price and packaging and convenience and other novel attributes that they gave up this deep relationship with the source of their food. Mm-hmm. Right before that, they knew the person producing it, adding value to it, or selling it to them. And so I believe today, especially led by a generation of people who don't understand why those of us who grew up in the 70s and 80s thought that eating at TV dinner or eating at McDonald's was such a treat, that people are reconnecting with the source of their food, and generally our society is taking the positive attributes of industrialized food for granted. And so when we look at experience and how people are reconnecting with the source of their food, it tends to be more regional. So what I've observed is that we're starting to produce food more regionally again, and there's a layer of aggregation developing that is allowing that food then to connect with more global markets.
And that's what you're focused on. Go ahead.
Yeah, do you think the, I will say, sustainable or ecological aspect and component to this is as critical to the desire to have more regional closeness to your food again? Like, is that a necessary link for people?
I'm a bit cynical, but I don't actually think that most consumers are concerned with sustainability or human health.
So neither do I, and that I was curious for your take. And we have this opportunity of really reaching a lot, I would say a broader audience because of that it's not necessary to reach just the people who want to eat very sustainably for the land, for the animal, for whatever it is. It's the people who really just, care about themselves or meeting what they're consuming for they themselves only, and what an opportunity that is too.
What about price?
Yeah.
Are they thinking about price? What do you think's driving it?
Well,
you said it's re-regionalizing. They want to be in touch. Why? Why do they want to be in touch with their food again?
So I think it's about experience. And the consumer, when there is a story attached to their food that feels aligned with their values or who they perceive themselves to be, or in the most cynical case, who they want other people to perceive they are, that there needs to be an authenticity, a transparency, and a connection.
Like the wine industry did. You were the first person to actually tell me years ago that you were thinking that more food systems were going to be more like the wine industry. They were going to tell stories and there was going to be more to it.
Well, I think the wine industry is an incredible proxy for what's, it was really the first case of this happening, where you had large wine companies realizing that consumers were connecting with smaller, authentic brands that had a high-quality product.
Came from a place.
Came from a sense of place. Those large companies started buying the small, authentic wineries as a way to drive growth. They would ultimately need to or decide to grow that production and produce it for cheap, for less money. And so the quality of that product would deteriorate, and ultimately those customers would go on to find their other favorite wine company. And you ended up in this cycle of acquisition where the big guys would just keep buying the small guys to stay relevant with the consumer. Well, we then saw that happen with craft beer and spirits. And we're seeing it now I've observed over the last 20 years, it happening across almost every category of food.
Yeah. I think of all the early kind of ice cream makers and like early on the sustainable organic, they all got bought up. Yogurts, everything.
Ben and Jerry's.
Yeah.
I'd never thought about that, the comparison to the wine industry. That's very interesting.
Yeah. So obviously you have a view. You're thinking about the system and its evolution. What are you doing with that in your life, in your business, Grounded Capital? What are you doing?
So Grounded is how I do this work today. If we go back, 15 years or so, I was very focused on land-based production and looking at how we could transition those practices at scale from more conventional means to more what we think of as regenerative. And really,
so you worked with Prather, you worked with Hana. What else?
Yeah, so we,
Strauss Dairy.
Well, so if you go back then, we would develop a thesis for what we wanted to do. We would go figure out how we were going to get that exposure. We'd build a team around it, and then hopefully build it an enduring enterprise around either beef cattle or vegetables or nuts. And it was a series of kind of primary projects with other smaller projects around them. The goal at that time...
Were you investing or were you kind of managing, or both?
Or designing?
So we would develop an idea, we would raise capital from investors, and then we would go do it.
Okay.
And we're very hands-on, so we would be involved operationally with our team, and didn't get to be on the ground. Often wish we were, but we were very involved operationally.
Got it.
And the goal at that time was to look at how we could transition these operations to more regenerative practices. And by regenerative, I just mean making decisions to build the health of systems. When you asked, how did you get into this? I felt like there was an incredible opportunity in our food system, being sort of the fulcrum of our culture and our planet, to really drive a lot of outcomes for people and the planet through food. But the goal at that time was to increase production, decouple that output from the commodity markets through branding or adding value or some degree of vertical integration, both as a way to shorten the food chain and connect people with the source of their food, but also as a way to capture more retail margin at a farm level.
Yeah, makes sense.
So then in around 2016, I observed that there was increasing effort to build this supply, but that the change was not going to be durable if we didn't create markets for the output. And that in many ways, we were pushing on a rope, if you will. And so I began working with established mission-driven food companies that had transparent supply chains, where there was an opportunity to look back up that supply chain at co-packing and manufacturing all the way back to the land, in whenever possible, help farmers transition to more regenerative practices. But then through that food company, buy everything they produced if they were willing to farm in these ways. And so to create durable markets to support them. And I actually believe that farmers are happy to make this transition, and they can figure out how to get it done if they know they have a market.
So that's the secret to growing regenerative in your mind?
Well, I think...
That mechanism?
I don't think there is necessarily a secret. I think that as a society, we tend to look for silver bullet solutions to these systems-based problems. And I think it's a combination of things. And in everything we do, we try to contemplate a strategy that takes us from soil all the way to the consumer, and then is somewhat multidimensional. And think of these things in these what we call the 5 areas of focus, that we call places, energy, people, food, and nature. And the idea is to contemplate the built environment, contemplate energy efficiency, consumption, production, storage. Look at how we are either empowering people or can empower people or disempower them through work we're doing. Look at the relationship between how the food is produced in the land, how it's manufactured into nutrient-dense products, and how we get it to people. And then nature is really focused on what is both the opportunity and the implications as it relates to habitat, soil, water, and biodiversity.
That's interesting. That you speak in your language, right?
He absolutely is.
Yeah.
This
is her
all
thing.
my stuff.
This is what she did at Stanford.
Yeah.
So it's a very long way of saying it really depends. And
Yeah.
And I think that when we're looking at trying to build the health of systems and keep things in balance, there is not a formula. There are certain things that work, but really this has been 20 years of trial and error.
So, I have a lot of respect for what you've done. I think you were one of the first people I met that was in the investing kind of business development world, because I came more from the kind of what you would say the movement side, like the more organizing, community organizing, people organizing, to build support. So it was a different view. And I'm just curious, the worlds, they're very different. Yesterday we met with the folks from Steward and had a conversation with them. It's a different language. Investment in business is a different language than what we use often when we're talking to legislators or other nonprofits or organizing, events. It's a different language. Do you think that silo effect can be overcome so that there's more synergy among them between these worlds? I know I'm going off in a different direction that we hadn't talked about at all, but it just struck me.
Well, so it's interesting. I have viewed my primary role as sitting at the intersection of agriculture, the capital markets, and impact, if you will.
Okay.
3 worlds that don't talk well to each other, don't use the same language. And I think one of the challenges in driving change in our food system is that some of the capital being invested is being invested in really smart ways by smart people who have never spent any time on a farm or a ranch. And so I think that language is a big deal. Part of the reason that we don't use the word regenerative a lot of times is I think it can be polarizing just like other words. And so we try to use the language that describes the attributes of regeneration. And I'll never forget, I was at a private equity conference in Half Moon Bay maybe 10 or 12 years ago. And I was talking about this work, really investing in land for with these methods. And at lunch, the person I was doing the fireside chat with and I realized that we were the only people at this conference talking about anything related to what you might think of as impact, and the only people talking about anything related to ag. It was 400 private equity professionals talking about operating companies and real estate. And so we decided to try and do the entire thing without using any of the buzzwords.
Wow.
And it was eye-opening for me because I realized that it was a way to connect with people. And we had a line of people wanting to talk after that conversation. And so I've tried to avoid some of the buzzwords over time.
I think that's smart. The other thing that I'm thinking about is most of the people that I talk to who work in the investment or business side of it don't think about policy at all. They think of that as a slow waste of a time, I think.
Or a deterrent.
Or a deterrent. So what is your view of the policy world? I mean, is it a waste of time?
Well, I certainly don't think it's a waste of time, but I have felt that work is better done by other people than us.
Of course. Right.
For one, it's not our strength, but two, I believe that policy follows consumer demand, and that a lot of this work that's being done on the ground is being done despite current policies. And so I'm very supportive of policies, and I try to support the work of other people, but I'm not doing that work myself.
And do you think that the markets alone can change the system.
What do you mean by the markets?
That business side of the equation. So you described it. There's policy, there's kind of civic engagement, and then there's business. 3 worlds. They speak different languages. Could one of them change the food system the way you'd like to see it emerge or evolve into alone, one sector? Or do they have to all be involved?
No, I think that the markets can solve this and are solving it. And if we look at the data around consumer demand and how people are shopping, especially younger generations, I think it's very encouraging. One of the things I've observed during this time is that people are making different food choices across socioeconomic, cultural, geographic, and age boundaries. It's concentrated in certain areas and certain places. But I absolutely believe that we're seeing change in the markets by simply meeting consumer demand and building awareness for these products.
But what about something like, so yesterday it was brought up, I was talking to the Steward folks, and they were saying that for instance, the way that we do crop insurance is like a perverse incentive to keep farming the wrong way, or to keep farming in a way that's not regenerative, or allows a farmer to not be a good farmer because he gets covered. So what about those kinds of things? You think the market can solve those things?
Well, I think there are a lot of headwinds for people who are farming and ranching in these ways. And many of them are policy related. But I am not somebody who thinks we should wait for the policies to change to be doing this work and providing these products to the consumers who do want them.
Okay. Yeah, I would agree with that too. I think you can't. I think you have to actually have you have to have the public driving things. They do that because they fall in love with good food, however you want to describe that.
You said that you're seeing, or that people across socioeconomic lines are really having this interest in better food, or food that they know where it's coming from. I'm very curious about that, because I think a lot of the conversation within this space is how access is only for people who have their own personal capital to be able to invest in it, or that regenerative or organic food, healthier food, is more expensive. So how are different socioeconomic communities accessing or tapping into this new opportunity or this interest of theirs?
Sure. Well, I think it differs in different regions, but for example, so this food oftentimes is more expensive, but when you look at the nutrient density of that food compared to some of the packaged food that people are buying that seems cheaper, there's a lot of discussion about that. The way that we have focused on providing access to this food to folks is by thinking about how we introduce it to them. So, oftentimes it's making it available to them and letting them see how they cook with it, because I've heard conversations from Mary Berry over the last couple days talking about just the infrastructure, the people who are required to actually farm in these ways. Well, I think that a lot has been lost among the consumer in terms of education to know how to prepare these simple foods. And so what we've tried to do is build awareness for how to prepare them. One of the things that I think is interesting at farmers markets, and there are tens of thousands of farmers markets across the country, certainly not in every community, but is these programs to double the value of SNAP benefits. And
Market Match.
Market Match. And then there are companies
created.
And then there are companies like Amy's. I don't know if you're familiar with the frozen food company.
Yes.
They don't talk about it a lot, but this is really good organic food. It sounds funny, and I didn't realize it until I toured one of their plants. But they are delivering I would believe, very simple, frozen, organic food that's already prepared and ready to heat to most communities across the country.
Yeah, I mean, Mandara, my goddaughter, she and her student friends bought that and they could afford it when they were in school.
Yeah, and you can buy an entree for $6 to $7. And by the way, I need to note that as a SEC registered firm, that we are not invested in
Amy's.
In Amy's, yes.
Okay, good.
Yeah, but there are different ways to access food, which actually I'm glad you brought that up too, because I think there's there's a mixed narrative of we have a lot of you're asking me to make food from scratch and I don't have the time for that. There's that
kitchen.
narrative, or the kitchen, or whatever it is, and that there are opportunities to really, I'm going to say, vote for your food in the way that you want to, and eat the impact that you want to, that fit with a variety of lifestyles as well.
I do think price, though, and accessibility is a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, so much of our food, of our conventional food, is subsidized.
Yeah. Right.
This
So there's
is one of the
another
challenges.
policy issue right there.
Yeah.
So that's why I always want to bring up in a way with colleagues, allies, I will say, allies who are on the business investor side, that you can't, I don't think you could totally change the system alone. You're going to have, if you're subsidizing crop insurance that allows farming, not good farming to go on, if you're subsidizing the big, companies in other ways, you're going to have problems. But so I want to get in. Yesterday we had a conversation just kind of casually. We're standing around waiting for something to happen. I can't remember what it was. But anyway, we started talking about how you see the system evolving and where you think it's going to go. I'm very curious about where we are right now in terms of this movement to create a better, healthier food system. How would you describe its state, and what needs to happen next to keep the momentum growing?
I think the needs are different in different places. So there are people who are focused on having an impact on the food system from a national perspective. My perspective has been that we might be better off taking more of a hub and spoke approach. Mm-hmm. So going back to your idea of regional food systems, but then connecting those regional food systems into a fabric that provides a national solution. Mm-hmm. The challenges that we see in proteins are different than the challenges we see in vegetables or nuts or other things. The work that Cole is doing through Old Salt is an example of...
The co-op.
Well, it's a co-op, but I also think that the vertical integration
Mm-hmm.
is so much more, is such an important part of this.
Do you want to just describe that for folks, what he has? I mean,
Yeah, and I'm not a part of it, so I'll generalize.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a group of ranches that all have similar values. They are aggregating the output from those ranches, processing that meat, and then...
places they own.
Pardon?
And places they own.
And places they own. And I don't think that you have to own it, but you have to have access to it. And so, processing has always been, whether it's meat processing or washing and packing vegetables, has always been an important element for us in our work and providing capacity to other smaller producers. But they are then creating fresh cut meats. They are selling that through different channels. I believe they're creating value-added products as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then
we just tasted some,
yeah, and then they have the restaurants.
They have 2, and you said they want to open up as many as 9 more.
Oh, really? Oh, that's great.
Yeah. That's money. Yeah.
And so in some products you can do that, and others you can't. So if we were to look at fruits and vegetables, I think it's really just a matter of increasing supply and getting that to people in a way that they trust. And I believe that, if you look at the data, it supports it, but the consumer wants to buy food that they trust and that they can have a relationship with. I used to be involved with something called Prather Ranch, and they weren't certified organic, although I think being certified organic is valuable. They had been at one time, but there was a group of customers who called themselves Prathertarians, who were vegetarians who only ate Prather meat because of the traceability and transparency. Mm-hmm. It was about relationship. Mm-hmm. And I think that the more that we can shorten that food chain, make food less anonymous, and connect people to brands, that the brands will ultimately become the good housekeeping seals of approval. And that then allows you to build the brand. I don't think most consumers are in a place to go to a farmer's market and then, aggregate their food from a bunch of different sources, but they can connect to a brand. Mm-hmm. And if the brand can then have scale and support other smaller producers, you start to get a lot of leverage to start to create a bigger solution.
Yeah, and I think that's been a theme. I think what you're saying has been a theme here the last couple of days. Individual conversation. We talked to Stemple Creek yesterday, Connor Hackett, about that. That's basically their business. They're building relationships. It's about relationship. We heard the same thing in the talks yesterday morning from different people about their businesses. It's all about relationships that they're building where people trust them, they know them, they believe them.
Yeah, I think it starts small, right? The only way that you build that integrity and that trust is to do what you say you're doing for consumers. I see food companies that come to me and they'll ask, well, how do I become the next Traditional Medicinals or Prather Ranch? And they're a year old. Mm-hmm. And my response is, well, keep doing what you say you're going to do for the next 10 years and build some trust. I think that it's about integrity, and it's about doing what you say you're going to do and providing a really good product.
I think we live in a time where there's a lot of cynicism about the systems that we live in. I was looking at something last night where people, their faith in the systems that for the last 50, 100 years have been kind of determining things are kind of frayed. The politics are frayed. There's been a lot of corruption in business, you remember 2007 and 8, what happened with all the people's investments in their mortgages. I mean, there's just a lot of erosion of faith. So I think that is what's creating the opportunity that you're describing for food producers. It's like it's a contrast. There's so many things you can't trust now that people are looking for things they can trust, where they feel connected. I mean, look at how many people came here to this event. A lot of them came a long way. Right. They're from all over.
And, this group is socioeconomically diverse, I'm guessing. Mm-hmm. And not all of them are farmers and ranchers, mm-hmm. but they all have an interest in this common set of values. We're sitting in the middle of a meadow 60 miles from a fairly good-sized town with, 1,000 people?
No, 5,000.
5,000?
5,000 people.
It's really spread out this year.
Yeah.
I also think there's another dynamic here when we talk about cost.
Yeah.
I think back to Starbucks mm-hmm. when people said, nobody is going to spend $5 on a cup of coffee when they're happy paying 50 cents at the local cafe. But that conversation suggested that they were buying a cup of coffee. I believe they're buying an experience. And for somebody who is more privileged, they may not think about that $5. But for somebody who is even in an urban environment, that Starbucks may be the nicest place in town to go.
Well, where they work now.
Or they work.
Yeah.
And there's choice. They go in and they can design the drink that they would like to have. And they spend time in that place. And for that $5, they're having an experience. It may not be exactly the same with our simple foods, but I think there's a lot of correlation. And when we look at how younger people are making food choices, their parents may not spend $20 a pound for meat, but they're spending $20 a pound just buying less of it. And we're seeing this across the country.
Yeah, I was talking to Stemple yesterday about when I first started buying Stemple Creek, I was buying it at Oliver's Market. You probably know Oliver's Market, the Bay Area, in Sonoma County, 4 stores, 5 stores maybe. It was $24 a pound for the most expensive steak. It's now $35. They're not selling any less meat in those stores. They're selling the same amount of meat. People are paying $10 more a pound over 4 years, just in 4 years. So that tells me it's sticky. People are into whatever it is that they're buying about that meat. They're staying with it.
Yeah, and I'm curious whether that would be sustainable. I feel like we're in a stage right now with beef prices so high that it has to be taking a toll.
Oh, I think it probably is for some consumers for sure.
But what I do believe is that consumer is now not going and buying feedlot beef.
Right.
So they may be eating less of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're probably eating less. I'm eating less because can't spend $35 a pound,
every day,
or even 3 days a week. It's like a lot. It's a lot of money. But I didn't stop buying Stemple Creek.
I mean, I think it's hard once you make that decision to go back to it from whatever brought you to that, whether it's values-based or whether it's health-based or even while it tastes different. And that's an incredible thing to see just across the board. And once you start eating it at home, you're going to request it from, your campuses that you're studying at, maybe if you're a student, or the workplaces you're at, or the restaurants you're frequenting.
Well, let's get into something there. You touched on something, Coco, that we haven't really talked about. Nutrient density. You mentioned it briefly at the very beginning, but I mean, there is this whole thing about regenerative meats, regenerative plants grown, plants grown on regenerative farms where the soil's really healthy, and this idea of nutrient density. Do you think that you don't think people eat for health? Is that what you said earlier?
Well, I think some people eat for health.
But not the mass market.
I don't know. I don't mean to. I'm suspect, and maybe I can relate it to just human health in general. As I've thought about this systems-based work, I think about it in the context of agriculture, human health, and so on. If we think of human health, we pretty much know what it takes to be healthy. If we eat simple foods, drink a lot of water, sleep, exercise, and have friends, probably also have some purpose, we're probably going to be fine. But instead, as a society, we eat a lot of junk, don't sleep, don't exercise, and then we take pills to lose weight, to go to sleep, and to treat chronic disease. Most of the capital gets invested in the drugs to treat the symptoms of these indications, which is important to do it, but in some ways, I believe it's actually just enabled us to be unhealthy. There are two ways to, not have these the problems. One is to keep your body in balance, and the other is to take a pill that keeps you from having a heart attack.
Patch quick fix.
So when I talk about the consumer and making their food decisions, I tend to believe that it's more driven by experience and relationship and other attributes than it is about their own human health. That's certainly not the case for everybody, but I wouldn't want to rely on the consumer's decisions around human health in order to drive this change or even support our businesses.
Yeah, it makes sense. So, I mean, if you look at where most people shop, I think you're right. But will that change? I mean, I think about my mom often. She would freak out when she'd see what I would spend for money. I mean, what money I would spend for food. She would freak out. She was born during the Great Depression. She was raised in a certain way, and she could never accept it, even though she knew what my life and job was about. She was like, I can't believe you're spending that much money on that food. So it is somewhat generational. It does seem to me, and even in my lifetime in this world, 30 years working in this food system stuff, I have seen the amount of young people who are now into restaurants. They know more about restaurants. They know more about food. They're interested in food. All the people are going, there's now over 200 food studies programs in the United States. Soil studies have come back. Soil science died for a while. It's huge again. So, I mean, there's interesting things happening with this next generation. Maybe there will be more people.
Well, and I actually think some of this work bridges generations. So we see on the investing side, we work with a lot of family offices. And in a number of cases, it allowed a younger generation to get involved in investing with possibly a father who was more conventional.
Yeah.
Because the investments tend to be discrete, right? We're talking about philosophical and aspirational ideas in this discussion. But when you get down to the nuts and bolts of it, you're investing in land or you're investing in an operating company. And those businesses have to be healthy and have to be fundamentally strong, or at least that's our goal. But if you can drive all these other outcomes and satisfy consumer demand, you can have a lot of impact. And so one of the things that I've observed over the last 20 years is that in some ways this work bridges generations because the parent can care a lot about the practical elements of it, and the next generation can care about the aspirational elements of it. And I don't mean to bifurcate it that way, but we've seen this happen in on multiple occasions.
Yeah, that's encouraging. That's encouraging. So what do you want to happen with your business in the next 3 years? We're out of time here, so let's hear what your vision is for what you want to see. They've been asking this question of the different panels here. What do you want to see happen with Grounded Capital over the next 3 years?
Well, our goal is to keep doing the work that we're doing. And the more that we can build these enterprises, the more we build capacity for what we're trying to achieve in the food system. And so, we'll continue to invest in established mission-driven operating companies that have transparent supply chains where we can help grow them, and by growing them, increase the outcomes that are not just financial. And then on the agricultural side, our intention is to help others build more businesses around vertically integrated ag, where we are connecting the consumer back to the source of their food and building brands around products that have really high integrity.
And just kind of final follow-up question to that. Are there specific sectors in the food system that you think are most promising? Like, we're here to meat-centered kind of activity, but do you see that there's other sectors that are just as kind of dynamic and filled with possibility?
I do. And I think that it depends on where you are in the country. But, if you look at what's going on with fruit, with berries, and with other fruits, so much, if you want to say organic produce, is getting imported into the United States. Mm-hmm. And my observation is that we can't supply domestic demand with domestic production. Mm-hmm. And so I think that, depending on a person's interest, there's opportunity across meats, proteins, produce, nuts. Everything. Dairy, we've supported dairy. Mm-hmm. And so the most important thing is to figure out what's appropriate in a place with the team that you have, and to go do it.
Great. Thanks very much,
Thank
Stephen.
you.
Really enjoyed our conversation.
Have a great day.
Thanks.
We hope you enjoyed the show, hosted by Roots of Change, a program of the Public Health Institute, a nonprofit organization dedicated to building a healthier world.